Simon, thanks so much for making the time to chat to me. I really appreciate it. And congratulations again on award-winning work for Andor, one of my favourite shows of the last year. It'd be great to hear you break down this scene and just walk us through what went into making such an iconic moment.
Oh, thanks, man. So this is a scene from episode 10, Andy Serkis playing Kino, and they're up in this control room. So I've got the scene here. This isn't how I normally use Avid, but I've kind of arranged it so we can see the monitor, we can see my bin, we can see my timeline. So if we watch this scene first, and then I can talk about how I work with it. Cool.
My name is Kino Loy. I'm the day shift manager on level 5. I'm speaking to you from the command center on level 8. We are, at this moment, in control of the facility.
Is that the best you got?
How long we hang on, how far we get, how many of us make it out, all of that is now up to us. We have deactivated every floor in the facility. All the floors are cold. Wherever you are, right now, get up. Stop the work. Get out of your cells. Take charge and start climbing. They don't have enough guards, and they know it. If we wait until they figure that out, it'll be too late. We will never have a better chance than this. And I would rather die trying to take them down than giving them what they want. We know they fried 100 men on level 2. We know that they are making up our sentences as we go along. We know that no one outside here knows what's happening. And now we know that when they say we are being released, we are being transferred to some other prison to go and die. And that ends today. There is one way out. Right now. The building is ours. You need to run, climb, kill. You need to help each other. You see someone who's confused, someone who's lost. You get them moving and you keep them moving until we put this place behind us. There are 5,000 of us. If we can fight half as hard as we've been working, we will be home in no time. One way out! 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 One way out!
Let's get out of here!
Brilliant. Oh,
Such
I
a
love
great
that sequence.
scene. It's such a great scene.
It's very cool. And Andy Serkis, I think that's the best we've had to see of him in anything. It's so good. So what I've got on my timeline here is on video 1, I've got all of the stuff that's in the control room with Andy Serkis and Diego Luna. And then on video 2 is the stuff down in the prison that we're cutting to. So you can kind of see how that on those 2 video tracks is split between them. I've got the sync dialogue on tracks 1, 2, 3, and 4 that was recorded, and then I've got some sound effects that we put in on like A6 down to A14 there, and then I've got a bit of temp music on A16. But if I go through what we had to work with from the control room, they did 5 setups on the day on 2 cameras, and this was towards the end of the shoot. It was day 165 of Andor, like principal photography, and that was back in August of 2021. So that's how long ago it was, even though it's only been out fairly recently. And yeah, the five setups on the 2 cameras. So we've got Kino, Andy Serkis' character here. That's like a 100mm lens on his front, and then we've got a 135mm lens on his profile. And they did those, and then they set up again, and they went to a 135mm lens on his front, this amazing frame in here, and a 180mm lens on his profile, so a tighter profile as well. Then they swung around and they did Diego. So we've got Diego on a 100mm lens from that angle, and another 100mm lens from that angle, but closer camera. Then they picked up the 2 guard dudes. So we've got the guard dudes from Diego's over the shoulder, and then we've got the guard dudes from Andy's over the shoulder. And then we've got the wider lens, the 50mm lens, which is Diego coming here and these guys coming down this corridor. And this is all like one big built set. The prison was pretty much all like you could walk around all of it. And we've got this kind of reverse on Andy and Diego there on the 50mm as well. I think 50mm was their wide lens for moving around inside. That's what they've given me. And then as I'm putting that together, I'll go back to our sequence. There were, and the way they shoot this, I don't know, on a Monday. And on the Tuesday morning, I come in and my assistants have loaded it into the Avid, and I'm watching it on the Tuesday morning. And then I assemble that on the Tuesday morning. And there were a couple of bits that I was like, I think I could do with a couple more things, and I need a couple more things. And I then communicated back to the director, look, is there a chance to get these couple more things? And because they've still got all the set up and they've probably still got the cast on contract and stuff like that, you can sometimes get those extra things. So what I asked for as a pickup was a closer on these 2 guys who they're talking to, and a insert of the map that is on the wall. I think I'd seen the map on the wall in maybe this shot or maybe this shot, and I realised not so much that I needed a map on the wall, but after this shot here, they run out to this corridor, and then the next thing we see is them all running down the corridor towards us. And I kind of needed something to go between those. I was struggling to cut directly from that into this running shot, and I felt that this map, which has got all the production design or the art department made this amazing, LED map thing that is meant to show and does show like where all the little prisoners are and where they're running. So it's kind of showing them moving throughout the building. So I asked for an insert of that basically. And the other thing about these 2 particular pickups is they don't need any of the principal cast for them. They got these 2 guys, and Toby, the director, just stood out of frame and he said, look right, look forward, look scared, and got them to just dart their eyes to the different eye lines that we needed. They didn't run the scene in the same way. They were just doing the eye lines that I needed. And the main cast could carry on doing, their schedule.
And those 2 shots come at the end of the scene. Did you get to the point where you'd cut enough of the scene that you thought, I need this shot to bridge between, to sell the geography of the effect that they're having in terms of all the prisoners are coming into one place, but also to bridge between the 2 corridor shots? Did you kind of feel like, I need this, when you were watching the rushes, or once you kind of had started assembling the scene, you're like, there's a hole here that I feel is missing?
I think it was butting the scenes up against each other and not knowing how to get from one to the other. This particular shot, this close-up of the guys, I felt was useful regardless. So we have got them, looking scared in Cassian's direction in case, we wanted to use something other than, this shot. But yeah, it was mainly to bridge us from what is scene, 29A into what I guess is scene 30, which is the running down the corridor. And you know what, I'm super glad because we did use both those shots. They both went in, and it's nice on a show like this that you can just request those pickups and it's part of your job, as the editor. Your job is to say, oh, can we also have this, or this would be useful, because they're all in the thick of it, up against the coalface sort of thing.
It's definitely a skill that is can save production and yourself a lot of headaches down the line if you just ask for it in the moment, making that contribution to the rest of the crew that something is missing.
I mean, I would definitely go to the director first. Like I'd usually text the director and just say, I've got a couple of thoughts, there's a couple of shots, have you got time to discuss, this? And then I would usually send him the sequence so he could see it, and I might, just put a black hole in and say, look, we could do this, and we chat on the phone. So chain of command for me is, hugely preferred that I go straight to the director and I have a relationship with the director where I can do that. It could be different on different shows and stuff like that, but that's what happened in this case. And Toby, the director's, fantastic, and he kind of wants that from me as well. He wants me to call him and, how's it going? Have we got everything? Did that work? And then to talk about the stuff that I'm cutting too, the other side of it. So we've also got all of these slates, and these wouldn't necessarily so all of that stuff in the control room was all shot, at one time on one day. But this stuff was probably shot over a multitude of days and might have been they've got 100 extras dressed up as prisoners this day, so let's make sure we get the 100 extras shot or whatever, So we've got this this camera in the factory floor looking at the lift and the prisoners who are on program and putting their hands down as they're hearing the announcement. We've got this nice shot of two of the guards overhearing the announcement, looking up, overhearing the announcement. This stuff would have been, picked up really quickly. I wouldn't have got many takes of this. Don't need many takes. And I'm sure they're just knocking these off as quick as they can. We've got this stuff in the cells. Had a few takes of this, a few of our known faces. We got this lovely shot of the guys walking down towards us, from behind them, walking down this corridor. This, which is the staircase at Pinewood, on one of the sets, in one of the stages, which has probably been used in, Bond films and Harry Potter and everything. This same fire escape. This is interesting because this is a big crowd of extras and a specific location and a key, supporting the Doctor here. But they only did this one setup. They did, I think, 3 takes of this where they started, on the roof. They panned down to the guys running. They found the Doctor. Doctor fills the frame, and then at the end he gets bundled out and he carries on. I think I got 3 takes of it, and that was it. They moved on. We've got some dudes climbing like a zombie apocalypse film. We've got dudes climbing from the side. We've got dudes climbing from above. And then this shot, which is the guns being handed over and over. And actually, I'm pretty sure that... So he hands... it might be easy to show you in the sequence, actually. Let me do that. So he hands a gun. It whips back. He hands another gun. But then that whip back is a cut into a different... I think on the day, he might have done 3 he might have handed out 3 guns and then he goes. So we cut one of those out so that he only hands out 2 guns or something like that, and then he goes. So yeah, there's a hidden cut in that wipe there.
Yeah. It's amazing how well you can hide a cut in a whip pan.
Oh yeah. Oh, you can always hide a cut in a whip pan, and I look for those, quite a lot. Where can I speed up the action or something like that with a whip pan, or where can I cut between two different takes or 2 different performances to make sure that I get the best A side and the best B side. A few more things to talk about my my timeline, I guess, I keep stuff super track laid and organized. Like I only ever use certain tracks for music, only ever use certain tracks for dialogue. My dialogue tracks, I have a real-time audio suite track effect that I applied to all of the dialogue, which is this like little RX here, and that's Isotope's voice denoiser. On a high enough spec machine, you can keep that on your 4 dialogue tracks, and it will clean up your dialogue all the time. When you play back, your dialogue is cleaner, and you know like where you might get dialogue from set, and if you put a cut in it, like here's a good example, like right here, you would hear as the Atmos disappears away, and then you would hear as the Atmos pops back in there. The Isotope denoiser removes that, so it makes the dialogue isolated and just clean on the track, so you never have to worry about these cut points. That's something that I can't really live without on on a timeline, and I know that if someone turned that off, or if the Avid that did the export didn't have that plug in, my exports would probably sound terrible, because I don't do any of the manual cleanup that a lot of editors are very good at doing. The music that's on this timeline is not the music you heard. What you watched and heard is the final output that went onto television and the final music. But I was temping with a track called Better Look Me in the Eyes from a film called The Beasts of No Nation. You're very welcome to go and listen to that track on YouTube or whatever and see what I would have been temping with. The showrunner, Tony Gilroy, and the lead editor, John Gilroy, would actually prefer us to present cuts without music. So when we would, I would need some music on there to kind of cut to and fill the scene out. But we would mute those when we would present the cut, because they hated listening to temp and not working on just the composer stuff. And also I think that, there's a very good mantra to be said for good music can hide like shit cuts, and we don't want to be like hiding bad editing. So by taking the music off, it makes sure that all the editing is, and I think if we listen to this without music, it still flows really well. I needed some music to cut with.
How did you go about selecting that track? Was there a selection of stuff to work with?
So in that case, it was almost certainly from my first assistant, Craig, put that music on or given me that music. I didn't find that track. I work often as part of a team, and lots of people are contributing to this. When I work on an episode, I'll split it up into reels. I'll work on like reel 1, and then I'll hand that off to my assistant, and I might just mark the sequence and say, can you put some music here? I'll say, can we have some music here? So, or I need some sound effects here. And often the team is big enough that there'll be, people who pick that up and do that. But then, yes, if the team was much smaller, or if I had a particular piece of music in mind, I've got whole libraries of music that I like and that are my go-tos. I also, before I start a job, I'll try and find like 5 or 6 soundtracks that I think are the basis for the job. I know when I worked on a show called Chernobyl, like we used music from like Tarkovsky's Solaris film and stuff like that as reference. I know when I worked on an HBO and Sky show called The Third Day, and the composer on that show, actually at the beginning of the job, Christo, he gave us, I think it was 100 hand-picked Morricone tracks, and he was like, just temp with these, or start temping with these, and then let's see where we go. And it wasn't like general Morricone, it was very specific, this track for Morricone, this track for Morricone. I try not to make it infinite. I try and, stick with a few. And actually, when you find one that really works for a show, you will find that the other tracks on that same soundtrack also seem to fit well on other scenes. For instance, like you might use the soundtrack from Alien, and suddenly lots of those work, or The Shining, and suddenly lots of those work. It's good to limit yourself to maybe just a handful of soundtracks, but even if you don't make yourself do that, it seems to naturally do that anyway. Should we have a look at the shape of the scene? So, I start on this shot that comes up from Kino's hand, there is a time warp effect on this shot that just starts a bit slower. So it starts down at 50% and then ramps up to, by the time we get up to him and he starts talking, it's at 100%, because obviously you want him to be talking in real time. This move on the day, the camera move, was perhaps, quicker, and I saw a possible better way of doing this moment to slowly come up. So I slowed that down. And that's up on that profile. Then we come round on the wider close shot and he kind of is darting his eyes to Cassian, and we go back and forwards between Cassian and Kino. And look, that's kind of just in those two wider lenses on them both. Then when we come back to them, we're closer on Kino and closer on Cassian as well. And we then pick up the eye line over to the guard dudes, and we get the shot of the guards. And at this moment, or at this next moment when we see him again, I might have used the front shot of Kino, but I've deliberately held off because I want to use that front shot for this moment when he says,
"There is one way out."
I'm withholding the use of that mega amazing intense close-up on his face where he's just, look at him, he's so good.
And it's almost like straight down the barrel, almost.
Yeah, it's so good. And I'm holding that back because I could have used that at any moment. I could have used that at any moment here, but I'm like, that's the best, most intense shot, and I want to build to that. And then it comes there, and then we go wider out and let them block out the rest of the scene.
In terms of shaping a scene, like you're saying, in terms of holding off on that intense shot for that intense moment, is that something that when you're just watching the rushes, you're like, you notice, okay, that is the best line for that shot, and you're holding it off? Or is it finding a way just by cutting, or are you sort of sitting and thinking, I'm going to go from this, and this, and then you go do it?
So I am very particular. I get in the morning, and the first thing I do is sit down, and in this case with the first assistant Craig, with the notes in front of us and with a massive screen in front of us and speakers and a cup of coffee, and we watch the dailies, and we do that like as a very formal routine thing, and I love that. Like, I really like that way of working. I look forward to watching dailies on a daily basis, as the first thing that I do in the morning. And we talk about it while it's playing, and I would have made notes while it's playing, and by the time I've watched it all, I think, okay, I've got a good sense of everything that we've got. And then the way that I work, you have script sync, and it shows you the script in a big column. And then you have all of these lines. These represent each take, and they kind of start at the moment that the take starts. So a take might not be the whole line or the whole scene. It might just start at this point and cover a particular point of the dialogue. And then you can see these thumbnails. That's the different camera angles that we have. So for this line here, where Cassian says, "Tell them what to do," I can see very quickly what all my options are. And I can watch through those options super efficiently and make my decision from that. And I kind of use the script sync and my mental awareness and memory of the shots to very quickly block out the scene. So I'm like, okay, I know when Cassian says tell them what to do, I know I want to be on Cassian's shots, so I know it will be like one of these 8 options here. So let's go through these 8, work out which one's the best one, drop that in. Then I know that I want to cut round to Kino for this bit, so let's look at Kino's shots, what have we got for that, jump around there, drop that in. I know that I want to build to end, perhaps, say that this over here is like the close-up. I want to build to that close-up, let's drop that in. So the script sync, if I get rid of that now, the script sync is the way that I cut stuff. And I think actually for people that don't use it, that's maybe the most like, I've not seen that before. And I know in TV drama in America, like script sync has been used a lot for many, many years. And in the UK, it wasn't used. And then there was also a period where script sync in Avid became an extra paid add-on. So at that point, it kind of disappeared, and loads loads and loads of people didn't use it, and then it came back with, you know, whatever version of Avid. I think it went away with like version 7 and came back with version 12, or I don't know, something. But now it's becoming increasingly popular, mainly I think because of the American shows that use it so heavily, and I won't cut without it. Like a lot of people say like it's really intense amount of work, or a lot of work for the assistants to have to do it. But I've cut, you know, short projects or independent projects without an assistant, and I will still spend the time script syncing it, because I know that I'll save that same amount of time later if it's been script synced than if I'm just trying to cut from the clips. Like there's so much of what I do and my process which is about investing time at the beginning to make iteration and changes and comparisons really quick at the end. You know, I want to be able to just change a timeline extremely quickly, or compare two versions, or if a director says to me, what other takes do we have of that, I want to be able to get through those really quickly, and it's much more worth my time putting in that effort at the top of the project.
So you're sort of using script sync almost as your selects and your string outs, as in you're not physically making a string out of all 8 takes of that line. You're just there in the script sync, and you just come and grab it from there.
I never make a string out. I might make a string out maybe of punches. Like, say someone got punched in the face, right? I do the 6 punch in the face string out, you know, and then we can look at those very quickly. Or you know, like I remember cutting a sex scene once, and it had been properly choreographed, and you know, they rolled over and then they kissed and then they did this and then they did this and then they did this, and they did 12 takes. So I would get all of the rollovers, all of the kisses, and string out a sex scene. When there's no dialogue, of course, like a string out is incredibly useful. But I would always go to script sync as my like primary way of editing, and especially blocking stuff. But for blocking stuff out, and then in a whole different way for auditioning takes and comparisons, you know. So one way that I work, I have a board of scene cards. I can probably, I'll show you while we're here. So that was my wall in my room, and that shows the scenes in episode 9 and how they intercut and how they're scripted. And as we shoot each scene, my assistant would print off the card for me, and we stick it up on the wall. And we usually we leave gaps where we haven't shot scenes, and it becomes like a giant advent calendar where you're adding scenes each day to the show. But that was how it was scripted for episode 9, and that is how it is. Like I didn't reorder any of those. I didn't cut any of those. Like it pretty much is as scripted for this show. Whereas there's other shows where, for whatever reason, for lots of good reasons, it all changes. Andor was a specific example of a show that was, you know, pretty much how it was scripted. I have to work with these boards. Like they are in my cutting room for every show. Next to me here, you can't see it, but next to me here is the Netflix show I've just been working on for the last year. Like I've got all the boards up. What those boards do is, for me, they give me an immediate visual reference of the editing of the entire film, right? Because I can see every scene on a very, you know, max level, and how those stories flow, and I can almost like run my finger down it and track like the edit of the show and make sure, okay, like, so say I just watched something, I've just reviewed an episode, I'd be like, oh, okay, I know it's working here, I know that this bit is difficult, let's, you know, or it will remind me, oh yeah, I felt that needed work, or I even remember like making notes on it, like I might just scribble, like, because I have them on a whiteboard often, so I could just put like music needed, and highlight a bunch of scenes and say, you know, music is needed here. That's very much part of my like process.
Are you tracking like progress in the boards as well, or are you doing that in a different way in terms of?
Completely. Here's another show. This is when I start the job, right? And I know that, and the numbers, actually, the big thick numbers are the shoot days. So I know that day 1 shoot day, I can see what's being shot, and I can. Later, as this fills in, I'll know what bits are coming in on what day, And yeah, it definitely lets me track how I'm keeping up to camera and stuff like that. And here in this, like, you know, almost end column, that's shot on day 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. As they would come in, I'd know that I could cut that whole sequence together, you know, join it all up and make sure that all of that is flowing as one, really. And it would tell me, you know, in between those, it tells me what to expect in those gaps. Like, I've got these 3 scenes, and then I know that Sarah wakes up in a caravan, you know, and then we cut to these other scenes. We spend a lot of time talking about these boards, looking at these boards. And then also, like, not so much on Andor, but on other shows, we will pick scenes up and pull them off the board and put them somewhere else and see what would it feel like if we moved these. And on this show that we're looking at here, we would watch it. It was like a film, so it was like an hour and a half long, or 2 hours long, and I would watch it with the director. And then we would do editing on the board, right? Restructure it, try edits on the board, look at it, go, oh, okay, this makes sense. Right, let's go and do that in the Avid. And then we'd go over to the Avid and redo it all in the Avid as per the board, you know.
Even just hearing like the shape of your day in terms of coming in, a few hours of watching dailies, then cutting those scenes, it doesn't sound like you're 8 to 10 hours stuck at the desk just in the shots. You're doing a lot of the work before you get there, so that when you actually sit down to do it, it's faster and more efficient.
Yeah. So when I sit down at, say, 9, we watch the rushes till maybe 11. I'll then cut one of the scenes before lunch. I'll pick like one of the scenes that I think I can get that done before lunch. And then I'll come back after lunch. I'll do 2 of the scenes after lunch. I'm pretty sharp out the door at 6 o'clock. You know, like Cinderella, like after 6 o'clock, my brain doesn't work really. And I know it's diminishing returns. So, and on these jobs, like this job that I've just done, it's a year in the cutting room. So it's not a sprint. You need to like have a good routine that is actually feasible and manageable. So yeah, so I tend to finish about 6, but I make sure that I get those things done. You know, like all of that work that I said I put in at the beginning to make sure that I'm fast. Like I'm really fast with editing. You know, really quick. I can block out a scene really quickly because I've watched the dailies and it's been script synced. If the assistant hasn't had a chance to script sync it yet, I won't bother trying to do it without it. I'll just go, all right, well, I'll just, you know, work on that tomorrow or something because I want to make sure that when I am working, I'm working at like top speed, you know?
When you want to cut down a tree, spend the first 6 hours sharpening the axe and then take the hour to cut.
Yeah, that's great. That's great, yeah. Yeah. If you try and cut down a tree with blunt axe, you're not going to do it very quickly.
Just jumping back into the scene, one of the things I wanted to ask you about is the One Way Out chant, because when I watched the scene, you can hear they're all chanting, but I was like, I can't see anyone saying it. And I was like, but it's such an evocative moment. It's like this amazing, like they're all in this together. But only because I sat and watched it, you know, shot by shot for this conversation, I was like, oh, I can't see it. So is that something you brought in post, or?
Yeah.
So it works very well.
Here on my timeline, look, we've got Wild Track, One Way Out, and this is. I wonder if I could. Oh no, it won't. I don't think it'll work to turn on the waveforms now because it's not. I don't have the media properly, but I've got a Wild Track of them shouting One Way Out. And that Wild Track was recorded on another day. I was like, that was another pickup. I was like, right, can I have a Wild Track of 20 men shouting one way out, and I'll be. This will sound cruel now, and it's not like because they're brilliant. But in the dailies, it's just Andy. It's just Andy yelling one way out as he walks out, and it's almost like this moment here. One way out. That's Andy just going one way out, and on its own it would never have worked. You know, that would have sounded just like a one-man army. We saw some chanting of One Way Out. I think maybe there was definitely a couple of shots where they were shouting one way out, and then we nick bits of that. But you're right. Like look here, none of them are saying one way out.
Yeah,
and like none of them. And I bet you're right. I bet when we go to the scene, I bet you can hear that they're all shouting it. Let's have a quick look. Where is it? It's here.
One way out!
Yeah, you can hear the scream of people shouting one way out in the background. Yeah, very, very astute of you. Very well spotted.
When the episode came out, and there's like, there's that moment of One Way Out, like people on, Twitter and everything saying, One Way Out, like it was such a memorable moment from the show.
We had souvenir wrap T-shirts with One Way Out printed on them. It's the name of the episode. The episode was named One Way Out.
Yeah, you feel it, even if in a way that doesn't matter whether you're seeing or not, because not that you would even notice. So yeah, it was just super interesting. Cool.
Very well spotted. Very well spotted.
Thanks so much for making the time to chat and to share some of your secrets. At some point I'll have to get you to spill the beans on your exact methodology for taking out blinks in a scene, which I know you talked about in the editing podcast.
I have talked about taking out blinks and scene. There are no blink removals in this, but I have seen a lot of people ask about it. I can show really quickly how I do it. It's not even that difficult. It's not complicated at all. Let me find a...
I remember watching for the blinks after listening to that interview, which is a great interview with you in the editing podcast.
With Hayden, yeah. The way I do it is really simple. Here's an example of taking out a blink. So we've got him. He's looking forward here. He looked to his left and he blinked and then he's looking forward again. Say I don't want him to look to his left and I don't want him to blink. Right? I mark an in and an out on V1. Right? I copy that frame and I put it onto V2. Is it going to let me do this? No, it's not going to let me do this because it is because I haven't got the media. Anyhow, so I put it onto V2. So basically then I've got a single frame which matches this frame. Then I go into the effects panel and I freeze that frame by going time warp and just going freeze frame, and I drop it on just that single frame. Then I drag that single frame for the duration that I want to paint over, wherever the blink is. So you end up with a clip that's, however many frames long that is a freeze frame. Then I go into the blend tool and 3D warp and I put that onto that same top clip and I just crop in around the eye, and then I open up the tracking tool. I track his face, like I find a bit of his eyebrow and track his face just in 2D, and then I tell that frozen eye to follow the track, and then you end up with a cutout around this eye following his face where it used to blink, and then I do it for the other eye. Because sometimes the head might not be straight or whatever, and the tracking might be a bit different, and you don't want to freeze his whole face. You just want to freeze as little around his eyes as you can, and that's it. Like it's not anything more than finding a single frame where his eyes open, freezing that frame, cutting out the frozen eye, and then tracking the eye to the rest of the shot, and that's it. It's not more complicated than that.
Do those get remade by somebody else down the pipe, or is okay?
Yes, they get done better in the online, and sometimes they might get done better by VFX. Often I'll use them to control, like an actor might look somewhere and you don't want them to look in that direction, so you're not just doing a blink remover. You're holding a look. I wonder if there's anything else on this timeline. There's that slowdown at the beginning. So that foot was originally a much wider frame, and I cropped in much tighter on that foot. That's a bit interesting. This one was, I was cropping out the left of frame because I think you could see a crew member or something like that. So the left of frame is cropped out. What else have I got here? What's that one?
More of a push in, maybe?
Oh no, there's actually, you can barely see it, but there's like a 1 degree rotate because it wasn't absolutely perfectly Kubrickian 1 point perspective. So that was fixing the 1 point perspective. That was completely reshaping the shot. Like, I've completely changed the angle and stretched that out because of how that was how that was shot, and I think there's probably a it was probably shot on someone's shoulder, like handheld, and I've stabilized it and then moved into it. Can you see that? Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a few bits like that. I do a lot of blink removal.
In watching the scene without any blinks or blinks in specific places, in some ways it gives the blink, because obviously like Walter Merchant's whole, blink thing is like when people are thinking.
Yeah, I'm just looking if I've got the book over there. I'm sure I've got the book over there on my shelf, like
in the blink of an eye. Yeah,
it's superb, that book. Like, absolutely incredible book.
In some ways, it makes the performances feel more intense, or the moments feel more intense when there's not blinking that's disrupting the look or disrupting the thing. I mean, sometimes, obviously, if it's like at the end of a cut and somebody's just about to blink and you want to get rid of that so that it doesn't jar as you go across the cut. But I think it's like, it feels, when you're using it for performance reasons, it feels like a really subtle and like at some sort of psychological level, a way of adding more intensity into the performance, because at some physiological level, probably when you're in a fight or flight scenario, you probably blink less because you're just taking in all the stimuli you can, and therefore to not see people blink maybe makes them feel there's an intensity to what they're experiencing.
I mean, there's a lot of it where if it's at the end of a cut to help you get over the cut. Also, I've read, and I've said this before, and I've read these takes on it, which are like, they're really offended by the idea that I'm, affecting the actor's performance by like reshaping their face or whatever. But I think that's such utter rubbish, because what do you think all of this is? What do you think every cut is? Every cut is shaping. Every tighten is shaping. And it's nothing to do with the actor's performance. I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. I am doing justice to the brilliant performance. I'm not... I don't consider it puppeting. I don't consider it manipulating or changing. Like, I'm really lucky to be working with such brilliant acting as, Andy Serkis and Stellan Skarsgård. And everything I do is no different to someone. It's like, well, they've got makeup, they've got costume, like we've got production design, we've got camera, like it's all filmmaking. Like, if you just want this to be the raw example, go to the theatre. Like, sorry, it's not the same medium. Like, Anyhow, I'll get off my soapbox. Yeah.
All editing is manipulation. It's just whether you feel manipulated or not.
All of it.
Cool. Oh, Simon, thanks for sharing. That's
hey, thank you, mate. That was fun. It is a great scene. I got really lucky landing on this episode. A prison breakout in any show is loads of fun.